5 fouls, 21 minutes, 1 point in the first half. That's what the refs handed Caitlin Clark in Portland. And if you watched that game, you already know something was deeply wrong, that we've got the footage. We've got the play-by-play breakdown. And what it shows is not a player struggling, it's a player being hunted by the whistle. And the most infuriating part isn't even the calls themselves, it's that Stephanie White stood on that sideline and did absolutely nothing while it happened. Who do you think is more at fault, the referees or Stephanie White? Sound off in the comments below.
Will retreat the dribble, looking to attack Clark right now. Goes to her left, Carlton at the free throw line. That's going to be a foul on Caitlin Clark.
Then they call 6 fouls in a row. If Portland's defenders were allowed to chest bump Clark, hand check her on every cut, and body lock her through 21 minutes of physical defense without a single defensive foul called against them, what exactly were those refs looking at? Because it wasn't the game the rest of us were watching. Portland came in with a clear defensive plan. They pressured Clark full court, used their bodies on her cuts to disrupt her timing, and hand-checked her every time she tried to attack the paint. That kind of contact. The hand on the hip, the forearm on the drive, the chest bump at the arc gets called in almost every other game in this league. Against Clark on this night, it didn't get called once. Not once. Portland basically got a free pass to play as physical as they wanted with her, and the refs just let it go.
Caitlin Clark, if anything, she got elbowed. There's Caitlin Clark's first foul. Somebody tell me where's the foul. There was 2.
Now flip to Clark's 5 fouls, because when you put Portland's defense next to what Clark got whistled for, it's genuinely hard to make sense of it. Her first foul. Go back and watch it, and you'll be looking for contact that isn't there. Observers watching the footage were asking out loud, somebody tell me where's the foul? And that's not a fan being dramatic. That's a reasonable question about a call that didn't have a clear answer. Her third foul was even worse. Clark didn't even touch anybody on that play, and she got whistled anyway. Clark herself pushed back after the game, saying she had her hands up and didn't foul anyone. And when you look at the replay,
she's right.
Carlton, tough board. Hustles ahead down the floor. Barker running the wing. Barker to the cup. Up and under. Knocked to the floor. And this will be a foul.
The timing of these calls matters as much as the calls themselves. So let's go through it. Clark's fouls didn't cluster at random moments. They dropped at exactly the points in the game where she was starting to find a rhythm, where Indiana's offense was moving, where Portland needed something to change, and suddenly the whistle bailed them out. Foul trouble in the first quarter forced her to the bench during a stretch where Indiana had real momentum. Every time Clark started to get comfortable, another call reset everything.
Wants to move Angsler out of there. On the wing, kicks it over. Angsler inside. Gustafson catch and foul.
I tell you what, it's good that they're not living by the 3, dying by the 3.
Late. Carries it through, and that foul whistled late. If it's again.
Portland's Carla Lighty finished with 18 points and 12 assists and ran the point against Clark for long stretches. And the reason that worked wasn't just skill, it worked because the refs let Portland attack Clark's defensive position with the kind of contact that would have drawn whistles if anyone else was on the receiving end. Lighty drew contact, and the whistles stayed quiet. Portland figured out fast that they could punish Clark physically, and the officiating crew wasn't going to stop them.
Seems to have settled in offensively late. How about the all-wheel drive?
She is so quick, just a little hesitation, attacks the hip of Clark, and then
What you end up with when you stack all of this together is a game that ran in one direction all night. Portland's defenders grabbed, bumped, and rerouted Clark from the opening tip without consequence. And Clark's 5 fouls came on plays where the contact was either non-existent or the kind of incidental stuff that gets swallowed in every other game. You don't need to slow the footage down to see this. You don't need to squint or look for an angled, it's right there on the replay. Clark shot 1 for 7, scored 6 points, and played 21 minutes in a 40-minute game. And that's not a performance problem. That's the direct output of an officiating crew that let Portland play a completely different game than the one they called on Indiana. Fans watching have been saying it for weeks now. Caitlin Clark cannot get a whistle, but has called for every single whistle on her. And after this footage, That's not an opinion anymore, it's just a description of what happened. And Stephanie White stood on that. Sidelined for all 40 minutes and never once challenged any of it.
2-on-1 fast break. Caitlin Clark, she can't play defense. They call foul every time. So the girl throws an elbow at her. Caitlin Clark, if it was her, it would have been a charge. I guarantee you that.
So Stephanie White watched Clark rack up 3 assists in the first 3.5 minutes, watched Boston score 4 quick points, watched Indiana jump out to an 8-2 lead with the pick and roll clicking, and decided that was the perfect moment to pull them both 0.3 minutes and 30 seconds into the game. Indiana was up 6, Clark was dialed in and finding people, and Boston was getting to her spots on every touch. White looked at all of that and called them to the bench anyway. This wasn't a reset situation. The Fever weren't struggling. Nobody needed a breather after 3.5 minutes. Clark had 3 assists already, which means she touched the ball on 3 straight possessions and did something right with it every single time. Boston scored on her first 2 opportunities. The offense wasn't broken. It was working, and White shut it down.
Stephanie White has got to go. This relationship is over. She crashed out and benched Caitlin Clark throughout the game. That is why Caitlin Clark was out of it. This is nasty. The owner needs to step in and fire this goofball, this freaking clown of a coach. See, she's a joke.
From the moment Clark and Boston hit the bench, Portland went on a 13-2 run. Not a small run. Not a quick 5-0 burst that evens things out. A 13-2 run that completely flipped the game in about 4 minutes of clock time. Portland attacked the Fever's backup unit with pace and ball movement, and Indiana had no answer for it because the 2 players who'd been running their best defensive action were sitting down. Clark and Boston came back at the 3:38 mark of the first quarter, and the score was already 17-10 Portland. Indiana never led again.
Caitlin had 3 assists in the first 3 minutes of the game, then both her and Aaliyah checked out, I think, around the 6:30 mark. Then Portland went on a 13-2 run. Just what was the reasoning for checking them out, or did they either of them request a sub?
Well, AB's still on a minutes restriction, so she's coming out. And typically that's around the same time that we've been taking Caitlin out before. We didn't in Golden State just because, quite honestly, we didn't Raven in that environment without another ball handler on the floor. So that's been our typical substitution pattern.
After the game, White told reporters this was the regular substitution pattern, that it mirrors what she's done in prior games, and that Boston's minutes restriction requires careful management. And look, Boston's minutes restriction is real. Nobody's arguing that. But a minutes restriction is a total number, not a timer that goes off at exactly 3:30. Regardless of what's happening on the floor, pulling Boston in the middle of an offensive run isn't medical protocol, it's a coaching decision, and White owns the decision whether she wants to or not. What made the post-game press conference genuinely frustrating was that White pointed at the team's execution as the reason Indiana lost, without once mentioning that her substitution ended Indiana's best stretch of basketball in the entire game. The players executed fine at 8-2. They executed fine when Clark was finding cutters and Boston was scoring in the post. What stopped that execution was the coaching decision to bench both of them while it was working. And White stood at that podium and talked about the loss like it came from somewhere else.
I guess you guys started on an 8-2 run, and then after Portland took timeout to kind of flip the script. Just what changed either on their end or on your end?
I just thought they were the hungrier team. I thought that they played with a relentless, effort, a relentless pursuit to get to what they wanted, to be disruptive on defense, to get to their spots on offense. I thought their competitive spirit was better than ours.
The 13-2 Portland run didn't happen because Indiana's bench unit was BAD. IT happened because White pulled the 2 players driving Indiana's offense at the exact moment that offense had Portland on its heels. And Portland's players are good enough to make you pay for that kind of opening every single time they get one. 4 Indiana players dropped double figures in a 16-point loss. Let's talk about what that actually tells you about this game, because it's not a simple story.
Short hole with the board. Clark eyes down the floor. Up ahead, Boston. Great catch. The vision from Clark, and Boston to the rim, and Indiana sprints out to an 8-2 lead.
Man,
Boston scored 18 points and went to the free throw line 9 times. Mitchell added 17. Cunningham put up 15. And Timpson scored 11 in just 17 minutes off the bench. And analysts were saying after the game that Timpson flat out earned a starting spot with that kind of effort. That production is real. Boston was getting to her post. Spots. Mitchell attacked off the bounce all night. Cunningham knocked down shots. And Timpson did interior work. That Monique Billings, who only played about 8 minutes despite her contract, couldn't be bothered to match. None of those 4 performances were flukes.
Clark in the paint. Retrieves the dribble. Mitchell, what a cut! What a delivery from Clark!
It's a little.
But Clark shot 1 for 7, scored 6 points, and played 21 minutes. And Indiana's offense never locked into a rhythm because the player who creates everything for everyone else was either on the bench or stuck managing 4 fouls against a team that knew exactly what it was doing to her. Portland switched everything on. Clark defensively forced her into positions where her only 2 options were absorbing contact or pulling up short. And when she tried to play through it, the refs were right there with a whistle. When she tried to avoid it, Portland's defense got exactly what it wanted, which was Clark standing still instead of attacking. 6 assists against 1 turnover on a night when she shot 1 for 7 tells you Clark was still reading the game correctly. Still finding cutters, still functioning as a playmaker, even while burning mental energy on foul management for basically 3/4 of a 40-minute game. You can only do so much when every drive carries the risk of fouling. Out.
See the season high for the rookie. Gustafson will let it fly from the corner. Oh, it is good. The first foul on that last possession, so the foul trouble piling up for Indiana. Excellent. Inside, Gustafson, the flipper, and you can't.
Since I was about 10 years old playing against her in AAU.
Late draws 2, flips it up. Gustafson. Gustafson will set the screen late. Over to Gustafson. Gustafson inside. Clark defending. Gustafson. Barker at the top. Gustafson down low. You already know what's going to.
And Portland felt every minute of Clark being neutralized. Megan Gustafson finished with 22 points on 8 for 8 shooting, which is a perfect shooting night. And she got most of those looks from open layups created because Indiana's defense kept breaking down at the point of attack. Light ran the show with 18 points and 12 assists. Engsler posted 16 points and 10 rebounds. Bridget Carlton added 14. Portland put 5 players in double figures because Indiana's coverage gaps kept opening up, and those gaps opened up because the defense never adjusted to Portland's ball movement after the second quarter. White kept rotating between switching and zone. Portland read both looks immediately, and the corrections that needed to happen never did. Indiana shot 23% from 3 and missed their first 9 3-point attempts before finally connecting late in the second quarter. Portland shot 51% from the field and nearly 40% from 3. That shooting gap didn't happen because Indiana's players forgot how to shoot. IT happened because Clark spending 19 minutes on the bench collapsed Indiana's spacing. And without her pulling the defense out to the arc, Portland's closeouts got easier and Indiana's catch and shoot looks got harder every single time down the floor.
Get her out of here. And Caitlin Clark addressed it and let it be known that her problem wasn't the fouls. It wasn't the refs. Her problem was Stephanie White. Caitlin Clark come out and let it be known. Let's go, man. This is crazy. I can't believe Stephanie White got some nerve like she's some championship coach to be talking to Caitlin Clark crazy.
Stephanie White didn't challenge a single call the entire game. Not one. Clark's picking up foul after foul. Her minutes are evaporating. And White's standing on that sideline doing absolutely nothing about it. Analysts watching the footage kept asking out loud, why didn't she challenge this one right here? And that's a completely fair question because White almost never uses her challenge on Clark's fouls. And this game was no different. Coaching isn't just rotations and play calls, it's standing up for your players. When the officiating goes sideways, making refs aware you're paying attention, and pushing back when the calls stop making sense. White didn't do any of that. Clark sitting with 4 fouls in the third quarter. And White's running the same defensive schemes that Portland had already figured out, and nobody on that sideline made Portland feel any heat about how physical they were being with Clark all night. There's footage from this game of White yelling at Clark about defense and telling her she's putting Raven Johnson in instead, and Clark's shaking her head with her hands up, visibly disagreeing. Observers watching that clip started saying White has lost Caitlin Clark, and honestly, when you watch it, that's not a stretch. Critics have also pointed out that White singles Clark out for defensive breakdowns while never holding Boston or Mitchell accountable for the same things, and one analyst put it plainly, never hear her holding anybody accountable that's not named Caitlin Clark.
Bro, get her out of here, bro. Get her out of here. Caitlin Clark said it. The refs, what? Caitlin Clark had 5 fouls. Normally, she talk greasy about the refs. She let it be known. The refs wasn't my problem. I had no problems with the refs. You know who my problem was. It's this clown